Cruise ships. They're supposed to be floating paradises. Sunlight, music, endless buffets, laughter echoing across the decks. But what if I told you that beneath the polished smiles and luxury cabins lies a truth so terrifying, passengers never return the same? These aren't campfire stories. They're real encounters, carefully rechecked from Reddit threads, forums, and survivor accounts. Stories so chilling, so unnerving, they blur the line between ocean mystery and living nightmare. Tonight, you'll hear 5 of the most disturbing cruise ship horrors ever whispered into the dark, each one dragging you deeper until you start to wonder what's waiting for you in the next corridor at sea. So, dim the lights, put on your headphones, and remember, once you step aboard Midnight Outcry, there's no way back. Subscribe now, hit the bell icon, and leave your thoughts in the comments if you're brave enough. Story 1. Why are the lights flickering over here? I muttered, stepping into the hallway. The ship's hum, usually comforting, felt hollow tonight, echoing unnaturally against steel walls. No one was around, not a single passenger, yet I had the eerie feeling I was being watched. I'm Claire Donovan, 28, freelance travel journalist from Seattle. I booked the Sea Monarch cruise to clear my head after a brutal breakup and to gather material for an article on haunted cruise legends. I'm practical, curious, and admittedly skeptical, but the first night on Deck 7 had already begun to make me question my sanity. The cruise started normally enough. Laughter on the pool deck, the clinking of coffee cups at breakfast, the gentle rocking of the ship against calm waters. I noticed a few oddities, crew avoiding certain doors, passengers glancing at corridors I hadn't yet explored, but I shrugged them off. Skepticism was my armor. By nightfall, the anomalies began. Cabin numbers didn't match the deck plan. Doors appeared where there shouldn't have been any, and some corridors seemed to extend endlessly, lit by dim, warm lighting that didn't match the ship's standard fixtures. The air smelled faintly metallic, like iron mixed with seawater. I was alone when I first heard the whispers, low, indistinct, coming from the far end of the hall. "Claire, come Deck 7. I froze. My rational mind whispered that it could be a prank or acoustic oddity, yet every instinct screamed danger. I followed the sound cautiously, heart hammering. At the end of the hall, a cabin door stood ajar, light spilling into the corridor. Normally, Deck 7 was closed to passengers. Crew never mentioned why. On the doorframe, a small newspaper clipping was pinned. Mysterious disappearances plague Sea Monarch. Deck 7 closed for safety. The edges were yellowed, brittle, decades old. My pulse quickened. I stepped closer. The whispers grew louder, a chorus now, but no one was visible. Then, a faint outline of a passenger appeared inside the cabin. An older man, soaked as if from the ocean, staring directly at me. His eyes were dull, lifeless, yet magnetic. He raised a hand, beckoning. I blinked. He vanished. The whispers ceased. Silence settled like a heavy curtain. I wanted to leave, run back to Deck 5, where the pool and lounge were safe, normal. But curiosity, stubborn, persistent, pushed me forward. The cabin itself was empty, except for a single chair and an old life jacket draped over it. Scribbled notes lay on the floor, my own handwriting, though I had never been here before. Don't trust the ship. Don't trust the shadows. Watch carefully. A chill ran through me. Someone or something knew I would come. From the corridor outside, I heard the faint shuffle of feet. Turning, I saw a group of passengers standing perfectly still, frozen mid-motion as if paused on a camera. Their eyes were all locked on me, expressionless. And then, all at once, every head turned slowly, unnaturally, in unison. My stomach dropped. A scream lodged in my throat, but no sound emerged. I stumbled back into the hallway, the whispers rising again. Deck 7. Deck 7, come closer. I wanted to retreat, to convince myself this was a prank, a hallucination, anything but real. But the ship was alive, and Deck 7, was its secret. For the first time, I felt genuine fear. The hallway stretched longer than before, doors multiplying. Every attempt to turn back only led me deeper. And, somewhere in the distance, I could swear I heard the engines change pitch, a low, resonant groan that wasn't mechanical. It was intentional. The next evening, the ship felt heavier, like it had sunk into the water, dragging the air with it. I'm Claire Donovan, 28, freelance journalist, and I had started to realize that skepticism could only carry me so far. Deck 7 was calling, the whispers insistent. I told myself it was curiosity, that the story needed to be investigated, but the dread curling in my stomach said otherwise. Dinner was in the main hall, usually warm, bustling. Tonight it was different. I stepped in, expecting the usual chatter, the clinking of cutlery. Instead, the room was frozen. Every passenger, fork in midair, heads tilted as if they had been paused in a photograph. The faint smell of roasted chicken lingered, but there was no sound. My eyes scanned the room, and then they turned. All of them, in perfect unison, their gaze fixed on me, expressionless yet accusatory. My throat tightened. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. A cold draft slithered across the floor, carrying the faint whispers. Deck 7, come closer. Why resist? I ducked behind a chair, heart pounding. The ship seemed to lean toward me, lights dimming, shadows stretching unnaturally. The hum of the engines was distorted, echoing inside my skull. My camera, which I had brought for documentation, felt impossibly heavy in my hands. The whispers escalated, overlapping, layering voices I recognized. Some crew, some passengers from earlier in the cruise, some entirely unfamiliar. One phrase repeated louder than the rest. You should have never boarded. I forced myself to move, weaving through frozen diners. At the far end of the hall, I saw the door to the kitchen, slightly ajar, light flickering. A note taped to the wall read, "Do not enter. No one survives the kitchen of Deck 7. My heart sank. Of course, I had to go in. Curiosity wasn't optional anymore. Inside, the kitchen was abandoned. Pots rattled, as if stirred by unseen hands. Steam hissed from ovens that were cold. And then I saw it, a figure hunched over a cutting board, silhouette backlit by dim fluorescent light. As I stepped closer, it straightened. My stomach dropped. It wasn't human. At least, not entirely. Its face was a shifting blur, features merging, separating, morphing between every passenger I had met. A sudden banging behind me, the doors to the kitchen slammed shut. The hum of the engines rose to a deafening pitch. The shadows of the ship warped the walls, ceiling, and floor. I tried the handle, locked, trapped. The whispers crescendoed into a scream that reverberated through my chest. In desperation, I saw a fire escape ladder behind the figure. My pulse racing, I ran toward it. The ladder shuddered as I climbed. The fog outside was thick, crawling up the deck, curling around the lifeboats. I could see the ocean, black and endless, swallowing the lights of the ship like it never wanted them to exist. Then, in a moment that seared itself into my memory, I looked back. The figure from the kitchen had followed me. No, it wasn't moving, yet somehow it kept pace, gliding over the deck, its gaze locked onto mine. I stumbled, nearly falling. The fog seemed to reach, through the railings, through the ladder, wrapping my ankles. I screamed, finally a sound, but it echoed strangely, bouncing back at me, warped and distant. A hand, cold and damp, touched my shoulder. I turned. The figure was gone. Only the fog remained, whispering my name, a warning, or perhaps a promise. I had survived, at least physically, but the ship had claimed my curiosity, and I knew I would return. I gripped the ladder with trembling hands, each rung slick with condensation. I'm Claire Donovan, 28, freelance travel journalist, and by now, I knew that the Sea Monarch had its own rules, rules that no one told you, rules that warped reality itself. The fog outside was dense, curling over the deck like fingers, blotting out the horizon. I climbed higher, hoping to reach the top deck and finally escape, but the ladder stretched farther than it should have. Rungs disappeared into mist, then reappeared. Every step felt like wading through molasses, slow and impossible. A faint noise echoed above me, a thrum, like the ship's engines pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Then a whisper, "Claire, why resist?" The voice sounded almost human, almost familiar, yet layered with dozens of other tones beneath it. I looked down. The ocean below was gone, replaced by a black void that seemed to stretch endlessly. I reached what should have been the top deck and found a door instead. A small sign read, "Authorized personnel only, Deck 7 maintenance." Of course, the ship made no sense. I hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was a maintenance corridor. Long and narrow, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent tubes. Tools lay scattered, sheets of paper fluttered, as if stirred by an unseen hand. And then I saw them, lifeboats, stacked unnaturally high, ropes dangling into nothing. A journal lay open on a nearby workbench. The handwriting was mine, describing events that had not yet occurred. Fog will claim the deck. The ladder loops. The ship chooses. I swallowed, panic rising. The journal predicted me, and the ship had written me in advance. My pulse quickened as a shadow moved across the corridor wall. Not a human shadow, something alive. It didn't step, it flowed, like liquid darkness, stretching toward me. I turned and ran, desperate, slipping past doors that shouldn't exist, hallways twisted, stretching into impossible angles, then abruptly ending in dead walls. I pounded on the walls, screaming, but only my echoes answered. The shadow followed, silent, yet unrelenting. Finally, I stumbled into a cabin, the same one from earlier, the life jacket draped over the chair, the newspaper clipping pinned to the wall. I backed into the corner, hyperventilating. The whispers rose again. Curiosity, always curiosity. I noticed a hatch on the floor, marked Crew Emergency Exit, my last hope. I pried it open, descending into a dark, narrow shaft. The ship groaned around me. Pipes twisted unnaturally. Steam hissed, forming shapes that almost looked human. I thought I saw a crew member at the bottom, beckoning, but when I blinked, it had vanished. The shaft opened onto a storage bay. Racks of life vests, boxes, and crates formed a maze. The shadow moved in waves, cutting off my path. I ran blindly, heart hammering, praying for an exit. Then, at the far end, a small door labeled Deck 1 Emergency Egress appeared. I sprinted toward it, lungs burning, only to freeze. Standing before the door was a figure, human in shape but impossibly tall, face obscured in darkness. Its hand reached out, beckoning, and I felt my legs lock. The fog from above crept down into the bay, twisting around my ankles, pulling me toward the shadow. I realized then, the ship didn't just trap you. It absorbed you, folding your perception into its corridors, your curiosity becoming part of its memory. My scream caught in my throat as I felt my vision stretch, the walls bending around me. And in that instant, I understood. No escape was possible. The storage bay tilted, or maybe I did. I'm Claire Donovan, 28, freelance travel journalist, and I had reached the edge of terror, every instinct screaming that the Sea Monarch was no ordinary ship. The shadow, impossibly tall, bent reality around it, following me with every step, yet never touching. I reached the door marked Deck 1, Emergency Egress, and flung it open. Cold air, real, salty, normal, hit my face. For a fleeting moment, I thought I had escaped. The fog stayed behind, curling around the storage racks like smoke, but I felt hope surge. I ran. Deck 1 stretched before me, familiar railings, lifeboats tied tight, the gentle sway of the ocean beneath the ship. Freedom, finally. But the whispers came again, louder, layered. Curiosity never surrenders, never leaves. I froze. Around me, passengers I had passed in earlier halls appeared suddenly, crowded, expressionless. Some looked as if caught mid-laughter, others mid-step, all staring. My heart slammed in my chest. A hand touched my shoulder. I spun. No one. The fog was seeping over the deck, thin at first, then thickening, alive, bending around the railings, climbing like water up my ankles. I ran, desperate, toward the lifeboats. Each rope I grabbed felt heavy, unresponsive, almost pulling me back toward the ship. At the edge, I saw something impossible. The ship's hull was no longer solid. Through the metal, I glimpsed corridors I had never walked, rooms I had never entered, and passengers, dozens of them, frozen mid-motion, their eyes following me, trapped forever in the ship's memory. I stumbled back. And then, the final choice. From the fog, a figure emerged, humanoid but shifting, faceless, with clair-shaped shadows orbiting around it. A voice, my own, whispered, "Stay, see, understand." I wanted to scream, to flee, to fight, but the ropes, the fog, the weightless pull. It was already too late. I felt my body lose solidity, my perception splitting. I was everywhere at once, in the storage bay, the dining hall, the narrow hallway, deck 7. I could see the ship from above, the fog twisting, passengers repeating actions endlessly. I understood the ship's secret. It didn't kill, it claimed attention, curiosity, and memory. Those who stayed became part of it, observers tethered forever. I am still here, watching, learning, waiting. I see new passengers boarding, laughing, unaware. The fog curls around them, a door creaks, lights flicker. And I wonder, will they notice me? Will they realize that the sea monarch remembers everything, absorbs everything, and waits for curiosity to do the rest? If you're listening, take a second to subscribe to Midnight Outcry. It helps keep stories like this alive. Sometimes, I think I see the horizon. I want to believe it's real, that I could escape. But the ship bends, shifts, swallows reality. The whispers always return, curiosity never leaves. I am Claire Donovan. I am the observer now. And the sea monarch is endless. Story 2. I heard someone calling my name from the engine room, but no one should have been there. The memory still makes my skin crawl, that low metallic hum of the ship vibrating through my chest, mixed with the echo of my own voice calling back. I'm not sure if I imagined it, or if the Mariner's Veil was already alive in ways passengers couldn't understand. My name is Caleb Hunter, 32, a marine biologist from Tampa, Florida. I study the ocean for a living, yet here I was aboard a luxury cruise, something entirely outside my usual routine. I hadn't wanted the distraction, but after my fiancé's passing, my therapist had insisted I take a break, a vacation to clear my head. I chose the cruise because it promised solitude, vast decks, endless water, and the promise that no one would pry into my grief. I'm introverted, cautious, the type who notices small details others ignore. Normally, I avoid crowds, yet something about the Mariner's Veil, its size, its hum, drew me in. The first evening, the ship seemed benign. Passengers laughed along the promenade deck, the dining hall smelled of garlic and roasted meat, and the neon lights cast the predictable glow of luxury. I wandered alone, listening to the steady pulse of the engines beneath my feet, feeling the subtle sway of the ocean under the hull. But there were hints, small, almost imperceptible, that made me uneasy. A door ajar that should have been locked. A single shoe left in the middle of a corridor, facing away from the room it belonged to. I chalked it up to carelessness, the human element of vacationers who forgot what deck they were on. The first incident happened in the elevator. It was late, and I was returning from the observation deck, the stars above reflecting in the glass walls. I pressed the button for deck 7, but the elevator stopped at deck 3. No one inside, doors open, dim emergency lighting casting the cabin in an unnatural red glow. The hum of the engines was louder here, resonating, vibrating, almost as if the ship itself were breathing. I stepped out, The corridor stretched unnaturally far, longer than it should have been. I turned back. The elevator was gone. The doors were sealed, unresponsive to my calls, and the emergency phone line was dead. I walked the corridor, trying to rationalize what I saw. Tight, metallic, smelling faintly of oil and salt water. Then I heard it, a faint scratching, intermittent, like fingernails across steel. I froze. The corridors were empty, and yet something, or someone, was moving just out of sight. I called out, my voice muffled against the walls, swallowed by the humming engine vibrations. Nothing. By the third night, the occurrences intensified. Objects shifted when I wasn't looking. A towel left in my cabin one moment would be on the floor the next, or hanging on the balcony railing, wet though I had left it dry. I began hearing muffled voices in the vents. Passengers, voices, crew, none of it making sense. Sometimes it was laughter, other times faint sobbing, almost like echoes from memories that weren't mine. I decided to investigate, keeping a small notebook to record details. Every corridor, every hatch, every door became part of a mental map I drew and redrew each night. Something about the engine rooms, however, felt wrong. They throbbed with a resonance that wasn't mechanical, as if the ship itself were communicating through the vibration of steel. On my fourth night, curiosity overrode fear. I slipped past the restricted signage into the engine corridor, heart hammering. The air was thick, humid, smelling of diesel and something coppery I couldn't identify. The low hum was deafening, and then I heard it. A voice, faint, insistent. "Caleb." I froze. No one else should have been there. The only sounds were the engines, the distant creak of the hull, and that voice calling my name. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. Something compelled me forward, deeper into the labyrinth of pipes and machinery. That's when I saw the first anomaly. A shadow flitting just beyond my flashlight beam, moving against the flow of the narrow corridor. It wasn't human. Its shape was wrong. Elongated, liquid almost, disappearing when I focused directly on it. And then I noticed the walls. Faint impressions, handprints pressed into metal. Not fresh, not old, just imprinted, like the ship remembered every passenger who ever stepped here. The scratching resumed, louder, rhythmic. Then a light flickered above me, revealing a small metal hatch I had never seen on the plans. It was slightly ajar. The hum changed, higher, vibrating in a way that made my chest throb. And from within the hatch, I could hear whispers. Voices I recognized, calling names I didn't know, telling stories of disappearances and warnings I didn't fully understand. I climbed down, heart hammering, flashlight trembling in my hand. The air grew colder, the engine hum resonating in the bones of my skull. I felt a presence, watching, patient, waiting. And in the dim red light of the maintenance bay below, I glimpsed it, a figure, pale, unmoving, staring at me from the corner of the room. One step, and it disappeared. 2 steps, and the scratching stopped entirely. Silence, heavy and suffocating. Something whispered in my mind, "Do not follow, or stay forever." And I realized, with a chill that froze my blood, that the Mariner's Veil wasn't just a ship, it was aware. It remembered. And it was hungry for attention, for curiosity. The next day, the Mariner's Veil felt different. The hum of the engines was sharper, almost sentient, vibrating through the floor, walls, and ceiling. I wandered the promenade deck, trying to shake the memory of the pale figure I had seen. Passengers laughed and shouted, oblivious to the subtle dread that clawed at my mind. I told myself it was fatigue, grief, paranoia, but the evidence in my notebook said otherwise. By mid-afternoon, I returned to the corridor leading to the engine room. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, walls glinting with condensation, faint rust stains curling like veins. The emergency lights flickered in a pattern that felt deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. I pressed forward, notebook and flashlight in hand, and heard it again. The scratching, slow at first, then frantic, moving rhythmically along the walls like someone or something was pacing just beyond my vision. I reached the maintenance hatch I had seen before. The metal was cold, almost impossibly so. My hand trembled as I pushed it open, and a draft of damp, metallic air rushed out. The voice came again, soft this time, almost coaxing. "Caleb." I climbed down. The narrow spiral staircase led me to a space I couldn't have imagined. A small maintenance bay, pipes snaking across the ceiling, red emergency lights reflecting on puddles of water. My flashlight caught something in the corner, a notebook, weathered and soaked. I picked it up. The pages were filled with names, passengers who had boarded long before me. Some of the names were recent, others decades old. Each one had a note scribbled next to it. Gone. Never seen again. I shivered. The realization hit me. The ship kept a record. It remembered. It collected. Footsteps echoed behind me. I spun, flashlight cutting through the dim, but nothing moved. Then a whisper, layered with multiple voices, resonated through the room. "Curiosity brings you closer. Curiosity binds you here." I backed toward the hatch and froze. The shadows shifted along the walls, elongated and liquid-like. I could see glimpses of figures, some human, some not, watching silently, waiting. And then the air grew colder, the hum sharper. My own heartbeat throbbed in my ears. I ran back to the spiral staircase, but something was blocking my path. The pale figure from before stood at the bottom, motionless. Its eyes were hollow, yet aware, and its lips moved, mouthing words I couldn't hear. I raised my flashlight, but the figure disappeared. A faint metallic clatter echoed as the hatch slammed shut above me. Panic gripped me. I scrambled upward, the narrow staircase twisting impossibly, longer than it should have been. I reached the top and stumbled into the corridor. It looked the same, yet different. The lights flickered red and white, the walls slick with condensation, the smell metallic, tainted with something I couldn't place. I ran toward the observation deck, hoping to find air, light, something familiar. The deck was empty. Fog rolled in from the ocean, thick and unnatural. The hum of the engines seemed louder here, vibrating through the floorboards. Then I saw it. Footprints in the mist, leading toward the bow, small and irregular, appearing and disappearing. I followed them, my pulse racing. A soft whisper came from the fog. "Do not look back." I turned instinctively. The deck stretched farther than it should have, railings bending, curves impossible. Shapes flitted through the mist, barely visible, human yet distorted. Some reached toward me, with hands that shimmered in the fog, their faces blank and pale. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Suddenly, the tapping returned, louder, metallic, resonating through the deck. It wasn't random, it was counting. Slow, deliberate, a rhythm that matched my pulse. I realized then that the ship didn't just move through the ocean. It moved through time, memory, space, bending reality for those it chose to ensnare. A sudden announcement over the PA startled me. "All passengers, please return to your cabins immediately." The voice was calm, robotic, almost unnatural, but the corridors behind me had changed. Doors I had passed before now led to nowhere. Some were sealed, some swung open into infinite darkness. The fog on the deck swirled unnaturally, forming faces, mouths that opened without sound, whispering names. I backed into the observation lounge, hoping to find crew or other passengers, but it was empty. A journal lay on a table, open. I read the last entry. "The ship remembers. It is alive. Curiosity feeds it. Never wander alone." I heard a scraping sound behind me, slow, deliberate. Turning, I saw shadows crawling along the floor, stretching toward me like liquid. The fog thickened, and the tapping accelerated. I ran through the lounge, toward the stairwell that led to Deck 7. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the reflections in the windows, shapes moving behind me, eyes hollow, always watching. I began to understand the rules. Curiosity trapped you. Attention fed the ship. Fear bound you. And the mariner's veil was patient. If you're listening, take a second to subscribe to Midnight Outcry. It helps keep stories like this alive. But beware, the curiosity that drives you to watch may be the same curiosity that keeps the ship awake, waiting for its next guest. By dawn, I knew one thing. Whatever haunted this ship, it wasn't limited to the engine room or maintenance corridors. It was everywhere, patient, and I was running out of options. By the third night aboard the Mariner's Veil, the ship had stopped feeling like a vessel and started feeling like a cage. Every corridor twisted differently than it had the day before, and the hum of the engines was no longer background noise. It was a pulse, an unrelenting heartbeat that resonated through my skull. My cabin seemed distant now, unreachable, as if the ship had rearranged itself while I slept. I spent hours wandering corridors, clutching my flashlight like a lifeline. I avoided mirrors where possible, because every reflection seemed wrong. Sometimes I would see someone standing behind me, their face familiar yet hollow, and when I spun around, nothing was there. Shadows stretched along walls like smoke, but their shapes occasionally suggested human form. I could feel them watching, always waiting, calculating. The first undeniable danger struck when I attempted to return to the observation deck. A panel along the railing swung open, revealing a spiral staircase I had never seen in the ship's schematics. Compelled by some mixture of fear and curiosity, I descended. The staircase was narrow, dark, slick with condensation, spiraling down into a space that should not exist. Pipes twisting impossibly, water dripping in a rhythm that matched the tapping I had heard in the engine room. At the bottom, the hatch opened into a room that made my stomach turn. It was filled with hundreds of life jackets, all meticulously arranged, but each one had a name scrawled on it in a familiar handwriting. Names of passengers who had boarded this voyage, including people I had seen walking the deck that morning. Some names were crossed out. Some repeated. I understood instantly. These were not just labels, they were records or warnings. A whisper hissed from somewhere behind the stacks of jackets. "Caleb, don't touch the records!" I froze. The air temperature plummeted. Frost formed along the metal beams, even though the rest of the ship was warm. And then I saw movement, the pale figure from before, gliding silently across the floor. Its arms extended unnaturally, as if to embrace the entire room at once. Its eyes were dark voids, yet I felt them boring into me. I ran. The staircase stretched farther than I expected, curling into impossible angles, leading me back to the corridors I thought I knew. Hallways folded over themselves, doors opened onto rooms that had no place on this deck. And always, the tapping followed, precise, echoing through the metal walls like a predator counting its prey. I found a crew corridor and tried calling for help, but the line was dead. I tried shouting, pounding doors, flashing lights. The only response was laughter, low, human, yet distorted, coming from somewhere in the vents above. The ship had begun to toy with me, testing my fear, feeding off it. I ducked into a supply closet to catch my breath. The darkness was oppressive. As I leaned against the wall, I noticed a scrap of paper pinned to a coat hook. It read, in scrawled handwriting, "Once you hear the voice, it knows you. Curiosity is no longer a choice." I crumpled the note and shoved it into my pocket. Every instinct screamed to leave, to escape, but the corridors had changed yet again. Hallways that led to the dining hall now ended in walls of steel. Doors that should have led to the upper deck opened into endless black corridors, narrowing and folding like the interior of a living organism. The whispering returned, louder, chaotic. Voices of passengers, crew, and something else altogether, overlapping. Join, stay, follow. I pressed forward, desperate for daylight, any sign of escape. I stumbled into the galley. Plates were stacked neatly, untouched. The smell of cooked food was gone. In the reflective stainless steel of the ovens, I glimpsed figures behind me. Dozens of pale faces, motionless, watching. I spun. The galley was empty. I remembered the observation deck and ran, only to be stopped by a figure emerging from the mist. Mara, or a version of her, stood there, eyes hollow. Her lips moved, silent, as if speaking a language I could feel but not hear. Shadows curled around her feet. Behind her, the ocean stretched unnaturally, horizon bending and folding, reflecting stars that didn't exist in the sky above. "Caleb," she whispered at last, her voice audible, tremulous, warning. "You shouldn't have come here. The ship doesn't forget. It feeds, it traps, and it wants." The words cut off as a tapping began again, slow, deliberate, counting. And this time, it was from all directions. The shadows moved faster, coalescing into forms I could not name, swarming toward me. I ran blindly, twisting through corridors, through doors that led nowhere, trying to reach anything familiar. And then, the floor beneath me gave way. Not a fall, but a slide, as though the ship itself had opened a throat and swallowed me whole. I landed in a cold, dark chamber. Rusted pipes hung from the ceiling, water pooled along the floor, and the air reeked of metal and decay. Shapes emerged from the shadows. Passengers I had seen earlier, staring at me with empty eyes, faces pale and drawn. Some reached toward me, others drifted silently. I screamed, pounding the walls, trying to escape, but the tapping grew louder, echoing in my chest, syncing with my heartbeat. The room seemed to stretch, elongating in impossible ways, enclosing me in its claustrophobic maw. The ship was alive, aware, and it had claimed me as prey. And in that moment, I realized the horrifying truth. The Mariner's Veil didn't just trap its passengers physically. It trapped their perception, their understanding, their very sense of reality. Those who heard its voice, who followed curiosity too far, became part of the labyrinth forever. I knew, deep down, that escape was no longer an option. By the fourth night, I had stopped keeping track of time. The Mariner's Veil had become an endless maze of twisting corridors, impossible stairwells, and doors that led nowhere. Every attempt to escape returned me to the same observation deck, the same balcony, overlooking an ocean that stretched infinitely, glowing faintly under a sky that wasn't quite night nor day. The hum of the engines thrummed through my chest like a living heartbeat, reminding me that the ship was aware, watching, and patient. I had stopped looking for other passengers. Some of them, those pale, hollow-eyed figures, followed me silently, disappearing when I tried to confront them. Others whispered through the vents, in voices familiar yet wrong, calling my name in agonized choruses. The air had grown colder, metallic, carrying a faint copper smell I couldn't shake. The fog rolled in from the ocean, thick and unnatural, curling around the deck like living smoke. Shapes moved within it, faces, arms, hands reaching for me, always dissolving before I could get close. I realized with a pit in my stomach that the ship didn't just trap the body. It trapped attention, thought, fear. It fed on those who observed too closely. I stumbled across a hatch I hadn't noticed before, labeled only with a faded warning, authorized personnel only. My curiosity, a dangerous compulsion, forced me to open it. A spiral staircase led downward, deeper than any part of the ship I had explored. Water dripped steadily, echoing in the silence. Pipes ran overhead, rattling with the vibrations of the engines. And then, unmistakably, I heard my name again, drawn out from the shadows. Caleb. The staircase ended in a room that was impossible. Cabins lined the walls, all identical, yet each one was decorated differently, some lavish, some bare. Every door was ajar, every room occupied by passengers who were not alive. They sat, stood, lay, frozen in moments of ordinary behavior. Some laughed silently, others stared, empty-eyed, at nothing. And above it all, a faint tapping, counting, methodical, echoing through the hall. I moved cautiously, each step sending shivers through my spine. A figure emerged from one of the rooms, pale, female, motionless, yet I knew her. Her eyes locked onto mine. Mara again, or a reflection of her memory, her presence warning me. "The ship collects," she whispered, lips barely moving. "The curious are next." I backed away, and the corridors shifted around me. Doors stretched into infinity, walls curved impossibly, and the floor buckled like water beneath me. I ran, turning corners endlessly, until I found myself on the deck again. The ocean shimmered unnaturally. Stars reflected in the water, but some moved against the flow, drifting upward as though gravity had failed. The tapping came closer, faster. Shadows converged along the railings, rising like black smoke, forming shapes that whispered and hissed. I ran to the bridge, desperate for some sign of control, of reason, of the crew. The bridge was empty. Screens flickered with static, showing only faint outlines of passengers who had boarded long ago, trapped in frozen moments, never leaving. I understood then. The Mariner's Veil had no schedule, no destination. It existed only to trap, to collect, to feed on fear and curiosity. The crew were part of it, or gone entirely. The passengers were all already part of it, drawn into its endless loops. And now, so was I. I tried to signal for help, radio, cell, anything. Nothing. The ocean beyond the railing stretched forever, unbroken. And in that unbroken horizon, I saw movement, a faint silhouette rising from the water, impossibly large, almost human, watching. I turned away, heart pounding, and the shadows converged behind me. I ran to the bow, leaping across slick decks, chasing the illusion of escape. The ship groaned under the strain of its impossible architecture. Doors and stairwells twisted further, hallways stretched, rooms folded into themselves. I realized I would never find my cabin again. I would never return to the world I knew. The ship had claimed me as it had claimed the others. And yet, in the darkness, in the fog, I felt a shift, a door opening somewhere I hadn't seen before, a corridor stretching toward some faint light. I wanted to hope, but every instinct screamed that the light was another trap, another collection point for the curious. I paused, breath ragged, chest heaving. The tapping echoed in my bones. The shadows flickered along the railing, forming faces I recognized, frozen in fear and anticipation. My own reflection appeared in the glass of the observation deck doors. Hollow-eyed, pale, waiting. I understood, finally. The Mariner's Veil was infinite, patient, and aware. Escape was an illusion. Attention was currency. Fear was sustenance. And anyone who dared to watch too closely became part of it forever. I stepped back from the railing, the shadows approaching. The voice whispered, almost soothingly, "Your curiosity, it brought you here." I realized then that no one would believe me. Even if I escaped, the memory of the ship would haunt me, and the Mariner's Veil would wait for the next curious soul, feeding on the same need to know, the same reckless compulsion. I don't know how much longer I can stay conscious, how long the corridors will twist, how long the tapping will continue. But I hear it again now, counting, rising, closing in, 3 slow, 1 pause, 2 sharp, and I know I am already part of it. The fog had thickened so much by the 5th night that the ocean beyond the railing disappeared entirely. I couldn't tell where the ship ended and the water began. Every step I took on the deck felt amplified, as though the boards themselves were alive, echoing my movements in a rhythm that matched the tapping I had come to fear. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a warning, a heartbeat, and a countdown. I wandered the corridors, searching for anything resembling an exit. Doors opened onto walls, stairwells looped back into themselves, and corridors stretched farther than the eye could see. My flashlight flickered, casting shadows that shifted independently of anything around them. I knew I wasn't hallucinating. The ship was changing, alive and aware of me at every step. Then I heard it, footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, echoing differently than mine. I spun around. The corridor was empty, but a whisper followed me, soft and coaxing. "Caleb, it's time." I ran. The stairwells twisted impossibly. The galley was empty. The cabin stretched endlessly, lined with those hollow-eyed figures I had seen before. Some reached for me silently, others merely observed. Their presence was oppressive, yet I couldn't look away. Curiosity had become a curse. I stumbled onto the promenade deck. The mist parted slightly, revealing the outline of a figure at the bow. Pale, faceless, hands extended, as if inviting me forward. I understood instinctively that this was the final threshold. Step too close, and the ship would claim me fully. Hesitate, and the shadows would consume me. I took a shaky breath and moved toward it. The deck stretched infinitely beneath my feet. The tapping accelerated, overlapping, discordant, a cacophony that vibrated through my chest. I glanced back. Hallways stretched behind me, impossibly long, doors opening into darkness that shouldn't exist. Figures emerged, silhouettes of passengers and crew alike, all frozen in a silent anticipation. The figure at the bow whispered again, "Curiosity brought you. Fear will keep you." I froze, my mind screaming. The ship's hum grew louder, resonating through every bone in my body. The ocean, if it could still be called that, reflected stars that weren't there. I wanted to turn away, run, escape, but the deck behind me had vanished. There was only the figure, the mist, and the infinite horizon. I reached out instinctively, and then the mist swallowed me entirely. I don't know how long I floated, or if I even floated at all. Time lost meaning. I was aware only of the presence. The ship itself, patient, observing, feeding. The tapping became my pulse. Shadows moved with me, through me, and the figure. It was everywhere and nowhere. Watching, waiting. I realized with a cold clarity that the mariner's veil didn't just trap the body or the mind. It trapped the soul of curiosity. Anyone who dared to notice, to question, to explore too deeply became part of its endless collection. I felt my own thoughts folding into the corridors, my fear echoing endlessly, my awareness stretching across decks I could no longer count. Somewhere, a voice, familiar yet impossible, whispered, "Another joins the collection." And then silence, thick and infinite, except for the tapping, always the tapping, counting, patient, eternal. I understand now that I may never leave, that the ship doesn't sail the ocean, it sails through those who watch it. And if anyone ever hears this story, if you're listening, remember, curiosity is not harmless. Sometimes it calls the ship to notice you. Sometimes it's the last thing you ever do. And somewhere in the distance, I hear the faintest whisper of my own name, carried on the hum of steel and water, Caleb. The horizon stretches on, unbroken. The ship waits, and I am already a part of it. Story 3. Why is no one in this corridor? The thought hit me before I even realized I was whispering it. A strange chill rolled down my spine, though the ship was perfectly warm. The hum of the engines a steady, soothing pulse. Yet something about Deck 7 felt off. I'm Ethan Cole, 35, middle school history teacher from Chicago. I booked this cruise to celebrate finishing my first book, a small local publication, and escape the endless grind of grading papers. I'm usually practical, cautious, maybe too skeptical, and the idea of a haunted ship story had always made me laugh. Until now. The ship Sea Monarch was massive. White steel walls gleamed under artificial lights. The dining hall smelled of fresh bread and coffee. The pool deck glimmered under afternoon sun. Everything normal. Too normal. It started subtly. First, a passenger at breakfast staring at me silently, expression unreadable, then vanishing as I blinked. The announcement system crackled occasionally with no words, just a low, static hum that rattled my teeth. At first, I blamed fatigue. Teachers don't get much sleep. By evening, I noticed the small anomalies. Hallways that curved slightly differently than the deck plan. cabin doors misnumbered. One night I tried calling the front desk to report a door open at the far end of the deck. No answer. The line hummed, then clicked dead. I pounded the receiver, but no one came. A few passengers noticed it too, or so I thought. One woman, a retiree named Martha, walked past me and froze mid-step, pointing at a window. Outside was nothing but fog and black water. "Did you see him?" she whispered. I shook my head. She disappeared before I could ask. The first real scare hit at night. I woke to a knock, soft, deliberate, coming from the empty hall outside my cabin. When I opened the door, the corridor stretched normally, empty. But on the floor, a single lifeboat key lay. I hadn't seen it before. I picked it up. The fog outside thickened, and I thought I saw a shadow moving across the deck. Sleep became impossible. Every corridor, every stairwell felt alive. I started leaving notes in my cabin to track reality. Halls normal, no shadows at 10:15 p.m. But each morning, notes were gone, replaced by new ones in my handwriting describing things I hadn't done yet. The tension escalated when the first direct confrontation occurred. Walking toward the observation deck, I almost collided with a man, tall, pale, suit wet, as if he'd emerged from the ocean. His eyes were black holes. He whispered my name, then vanished into thin air before I could react. My rational mind tried to explain it. Mirrors, reflections, tricks of light. But every instinct screamed danger. Desperate, I tried the radio in the crew's corridor. Static, then faint voices. "Ethan, stay, don't leave." I slammed the radio down. The ship was talking to me. Not the captain, not the crew, the ship itself. Later, I found a lifeboat. For a moment, hope surged. I climbed in, the ropes dangling, ready to lower myself into what I thought would be safety. The moment the boat touched the water, it sank silently, leaving only a ripple. The fog seemed to thicken in approval. I don't know how long I wandered after that. Each deck stretched further, more twisted than the last. Every normal scene, the dining hall, the pool, the lounge, was mirrored by a warped version, as if the ship mocked reality itself. And somewhere in the shadows, I could hear a soft, almost human laugh, whispering my name, always just out of reach. The next morning, the ship felt different. Not quieter, not louder, just watching. I'm Ethan Cole, still wandering the Sea Monarch, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. Breakfast was normal. Eggs, coffee, the chatter of passengers. But a strange energy pulsed beneath it all. People moved like mannequins, eyes briefly locking with mine, then darting away. No one smiled. I decided to follow one of them, a young man in a baseball cap, down a side corridor I hadn't noticed before. The hallway stretched longer than it should, lights flickering faintly. At the end, a cabin door swung open. Inside, nothing. No furniture, no bed, just darkness and a faint smell of salt water. As I stepped closer, I heard a whisper, my own voice. "Ethan, come in." I recoiled. That's when the first real escalation hit. The man in the baseball cap was gone, replaced by a passenger I had met at dinner. A smiling older man, waving politely. "Lost something?" he asked, voice warm. Then his face twisted unnaturally, jaw stretching, teeth grating, and he disappeared into the fog that now crept along the corridor like living water. Panic rose. I ran back toward the main deck, the PA system crackling over me. Not music, not announcements, just words. My own thoughts echoed through the speakers, slower, distorted. Curiosity never ends. I needed a plan. I remembered the lifeboat from last night. Maybe if I could reach it, somehow escape, I could get off this ship. The fog had become thick now, almost solid, brushing against my legs, slowing me down. I stumbled into the stairwell. Normally, it led to the upper deck. But when I reached the top, I found another corridor, unfamiliar, lined with doors that weren't on any map. A passenger appeared. a woman clutching a travel bag. She looked exactly like my coworker from Chicago, the one I hadn't seen in over a year. "Ethan, you shouldn't be here," she said, voice trembling. I asked her what she meant. She leaned closer. "The ship. It's not real. None of this is." Then she vanished. I reached the top deck and saw the lifeboat still dangling. Relief washed over me. I ran, unfastened the ropes, and climbed in. For a moment, hope ignited. I would escape this nightmare. I lowered the boat. But as soon as it touched the water, it didn't float. The water below was black, endless. No stars reflected above. My hands trembled. I realized the ocean didn't exist. Only the ship and the fog and whatever presence controlled it. I tried to call the captain. I found the radio again in the crew corridor, static at first. Then, a faint reply. "Ethan, the ship watches. The ship knows." I slammed the radio down, frustration mixing with terror. The ship itself had begun communicating, guiding, taunting me. By evening, the corridors had changed again. The hall I had entered that morning no longer existed. Stairs twisted impossibly. Doors appeared where walls should have been. Normalcy, the dining hall, the pool deck, even the gym, had all been warped, replaced with versions that looked real but felt wrong. I saw others. Some were passengers I had met, frozen in place, staring blankly. Others were impossible, translucent, whispers of what the ship had consumed before. One figure reached out, hand just inches from mine, vanished when I blinked. The ship fed on observation, and I was its latest prey. And in the corner of my vision, I noticed it. A door, slightly ajar, not on any map, no number, no sign. Faint, golden light spilling out, a single invitation in a world that refused reality. I approached, trembling. The whispers rose, calling my name, layered, urgent. I held my breath and reached for the handle, and the door slammed shut before my fingers touched it. I can still feel the pull of that corridor, the one that shouldn't exist. I'm Ethan Cole, 35, still wandering the Sea Monarch, and I've learned that nothing aboard this ship behaves like reality. Every step I take, the deck shifts. Every turn I make, hallways stretch impossibly. By the third day, the anomalies weren't subtle anymore. They were impossible. I walked past the dining hall, empty now, silverware neatly arranged, coffee cold. A family sat mid-laughter, frozen mid-motion, but their eyes were dark hollows. They stared at me silently. I blinked. When I looked again, they were gone. Only a faint scent of burnt sugar lingered. I tried to use the stairs again, thinking vertical movement might help me escape. Each flight seemed longer than the last. My legs burned. When I reached the top deck, the fog was thicker than ever. And then I saw him, a crew member, Captain Reynolds, or at least a version of him. His uniform was wet and torn, eyes hollow black pits. "You shouldn't be here," he said calmly, but his voice echoed like a tunnel of whispers. I tried to speak, to ask for help. My own voice sounded wrong to me, distorted, slow. "Ethan, you're lost," the captain's reflection said, stepping closer. I stumbled back. A wall appeared where the railing should have been, blocking the edge. Panic surged. I ran down the deck, searching for the lifeboats. Any exit. The fog was alive now, curling around me like a predator. I reached one boat. My hands shook as I unfastened it. I lowered myself slowly, hoping the calm water awaited, but it was a black void, silent, swallowing the boat the moment it touched it. My heart pounded as if trying to escape my chest. I heard footsteps behind me. Not mine. Heavy, deliberate, approaching. I turned. A figure, perfectly human but impossibly fast, raced toward me. Not a crew member, not a passenger I recognized, just a man, features shifting as he ran, face morphing between everyone I had seen. I ran, dodging into corridors, hoping to reach a stairwell or the bridge. The ship shifted again. Walls stretched, ceilings bent, doors appeared and disappeared. I stumbled into a room, a supposed crew lounge. but it was empty except for a single chair. On it sat a notebook, pages flipping rapidly though no wind blew. The entries were my own handwriting, describing events I hadn't done yet. Fog approaches, voices call, boat sinks. Each line was a prediction, a warning, a trap. I remembered my phone, left in the cabin. Maybe I could call someone, Coast Guard, family, anyone. I ran back, dodging shadows that darted along walls. My phone was gone. Not just missing, erased. It was as if the ship itself had consumed it. Then the whispers started. Layered, multiple voices speaking in unison. Ethan, choose, stay, leave, curiosity. My head spun. I tried to cover my ears, but the sound came from inside me. The ship was inside me. I ran again, this time noticing another anomaly. A corridor that seemed entirely normal. Carpeted floor, soft lighting, familiar paintings on the walls. For a heartbeat, hope surged. I followed it. Voices of passengers, real laughter, floated around me. Maybe this was escape. Then the corridor looped back. I was standing in front of the same lifeboat I had failed with before. Only this time, another figure waited, tall, shadowed, smiling. "You can leave," it said, "if you're brave enough to step into the water." I gripped the rope, heart hammering. Fear, hope, curiosity, all tangled inside me. One step could save me, or doom me forever. The fog swirled, thickening, whispering my name, urging me forward. I took a breath and stepped. I hit the water and felt nothing. Not cold, not resistance, just a strange weightlessness, like stepping into air thicker than anything I'd ever known. I'm Ethan Cole, 35, history teacher, amateur photographer, and by now fully aware that the Sea Monarch was not a ship in any real sense. Above me, the fog twisted, coiling like a living thing. The ropes of the lifeboat dangled uselessly, disappearing into nothing. I kicked, trying to swim, but the water didn't respond. My movements echoed, oddly delayed, and I realized I was sinking. Or maybe the ship was rising, reshaping reality around me. A voice called from the mist, soft, almost human yet distorted. "Ethan, you can't leave, but you can see." I tried to respond, but my voice was swallowed before it left my throat. Shapes emerged from the fog. Passengers, crew, figures I recognized and some I didn't. They moved around me in a slow orbit, watching, waiting. Some whispered encouragement, some laughed quietly. I spotted the captain, or the version of him I'd seen before, standing on what appeared to be the edge of the deck, impossibly tall, eyes hollow, arms outstretched. "Choice," he said simply. "Leave and vanish. Stay and see." In desperation, I reached for the lifeboat again. A false hope surged. Maybe if I could lower myself slowly, I could escape the fog, the corridors, the distorted passengers. I grabbed the rope, bracing myself, and felt the tug of the ship beneath me, subtle, insistent. The rope stretched unnaturally, bending toward the fog. Something alive pulled at it. A hand, my own, yet not, appeared from the mist and grabbed my shoulder. Panic shot through me. I tried to scream, but the sound was gone. The shadowed version of myself whispered, "Why fight what is inevitable?" I wrestled, trying to break free. The fog thickened, swallowing the lifeboat, the deck, the corridors, even the distant hum of engines. My limbs moved as if underwater, though there was no water. The other passengers, living or otherwise, watched silently. None reached out to help. Then, almost imperceptibly, I noticed a small anomaly, a cabin door at the edge of the fog, partially open, light spilling out. It was familiar, yet it had never existed in reality. I ran, tripping, arms flailing. The whispers chased me. "Curiosity brought you. Curiosity binds you." I reached the door. A part of me, the rational, terrified part, wanted to slam it, run the other way. Another part, the curious, stubborn part, pushed it open. Inside was nothing, just light, warm and still. I stepped in. The fog didn't follow. The whispers didn't reach me. I felt weightless again, but in a different way. Observing, detached. Shapes moved outside the doorway, the ship twisting, pulling passengers into corridors that seemed infinite. I realized then that I had not escaped. I had only shifted perspective. I could see everything now. The lifeboat swallowed, the corridors looping endlessly, the passengers repeating actions over and over. I was part of the observation, tethered, and yet I was alive, watching, waiting, learning. If you're listening, take a second to subscribe to Midnight Outcry. It helps keep stories like this alive. I understand now. The ship doesn't take, it chooses. It does not destroy. It transforms. Those who vanish are absorbed into its memory, its pattern, its endless observation. I am still here, still watching, still Ethan, but altered. The fog whispers, the doors shift, and every new passenger is a story waiting to be written. Sometimes, I see them, newcomers, laughing, unaware of the rules. The fog curls around their ankles. The lights flicker. A door creaks open, and I wonder, will they see me? Will they notice what waits just beyond normalcy? Because the ship never forgets, and I am part of it now. Story 4. I still remember the chill the moment I stepped onto the Ocean Whisperer. The smell of sea salt mixed with polished wood made me feel uneasy, though I couldn't say why. Then I saw the first anomaly. Cabin 214's door slightly ajar, though the crew had told me it was unoccupied. No one else on the deck seemed to notice. My name is Morgan Hayes, 32, freelance photographer from Portland, Oregon. I don't usually travel alone, but after the divorce, I needed something to distract myself. A week at sea, no deadlines, no people judging the shadows under my eyes. I'm the sort of person who notices details, small patterns in chaos, and that's probably what got me into trouble. I had chosen this cruise because of the ship's reputation: luxury, relaxation, and tranquility. Truth is, I just wanted quiet, a break from the world and the lingering ghost of my failed marriage. I wasn't looking for terror, I was too tired for it, or so I thought. The promenade deck was almost empty when I arrived. Families walked past with coffee cups, teenagers leaned over railings, and couples argued quietly. But then, there was that door, 214. It was slightly open, almost imperceptibly. I could see the cabin's interior lights flickering, though the room shouldn't have been occupied. Curiosity compelled me. I pushed it open gently. Inside, it was pristine, perfectly normal. A queen bed, neatly folded blankets, the kind of generic art hung above the headboard that makes hotel rooms forgettable. Nothing unusual, yet as I stepped in, I felt a draft and heard it, a low, almost inaudible whisper. I froze. Leave or stay. No one else was there. The corridor was silent. I laughed nervously, trying to convince myself it was the wind through the air vent. I even snapped a photo of the cabin for documentation, my photographer's instinct kicking in. But when I checked the display, the room appeared darker than it was, shadows curling unnaturally along the edges. Later, during dinner, the ship felt normal, or at least as normal as a luxury liner could be. I sat with a couple I met during embarkation, exchanging small talk about ports and excursions. Their laughter and chatter felt like a lifeline, grounding me. It was mundane, calm, a welcome contrast. And then, just as I was about to sip my wine, the waiter leaned in and whispered, almost imperceptibly, "Cabin 214, don't go back." I froze, wine halfway to my lips. I managed to laugh it off, blaming it on nerves or the stress of travel. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Later, I explored the upper deck. Fog rolled in, thin and harmless at first, yet I felt a growing sense of being watched. Passengers strolled past me, oblivious, while I kept noticing the same figure at the rail, a man in a dark coat, hat pulled low, looking out at the horizon. Every time I blinked, he disappeared. By the time I returned to my cabin, number 302, something had changed. My door was slightly ajar too, like an invitation. My heart thumped in my chest, adrenaline mixing with that odd awareness I couldn't shake. The room was empty, yet a note had appeared on the desk. Some doors are meant to be left closed. I didn't touch it. I left the room, shaking, walking back to the promenade deck. That's when I noticed it. The corridors weren't quite right. The numbering was off. Cabin 215 appeared before 213, and some doors repeated themselves. My footsteps echoed strangely, as though the walls were closer than they should be. I paused in the hallway, listening. Faint laughter, low and distorted, came from multiple directions. Not passenger chatter. It was layered, overlapping, impossible to locate. Then the whisper, "Morgan!" I spun. Empty hallways. My flashlight, which I hadn't needed until now, flickered once, and I realized the ship was different at night. It moved. Or perhaps I was moving through it differently. Either way, I wasn't in control. I tried to tell myself it was the stress of travel, that I was imagining it. But deep down, I knew curiosity had already anchored me to something that wasn't meant for living passengers. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the hull, every hum of the engines felt purposeful, deliberate. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. Cabin 214. Or was it mine? The mist pressed against the windows, rising unnaturally, shaping itself into faces that I could almost recognize. And I realized, as I stood frozen on the promenade deck, that this ship, luxury, comfort, relaxation, was not what it seemed. Something waited behind the doors, watching, patient, and it wanted me to return. The second day at sea started innocuously enough. Breakfast in the dining hall was lively. Families clinked glasses, servers moved briskly between tables, and the smell of fresh pastries reminded me that normal life still existed somewhere. For a brief moment, I almost believed the previous night had been a dream. The whispering, the strange numbering, the feeling of being watched. But the memory of that note on my desk, the one that said, "Some doors are meant to be left closed," refused to fade. I lingered over my coffee, watching the staff move with quiet efficiency. But then I noticed something peculiar. The same man in the dark coat from last night appeared at the far end of the hall, staring toward me. His hat obscured his face. I blinked. When I looked again, he was gone, not walking away, just vanished. Determined to regain some sense of control, I decided to tour the ship's decks during daylight. The upper promenade felt expansive, almost serene. But every now and then a corridor would twist unexpectedly. Doors appeared where none should exist. Cabin numbers repeated, and stairwells seemed longer than they ought to be. Each anomaly sent a shiver down my spine. Mid-morning, I ventured near cabin 214 again. The door remained closed, normal in appearance. Yet a faint draft escaped from the seams, carrying the smell of old wood and sea brine. I placed my hand on the knob. It felt warmer than the surrounding metal, pulsating slightly under my fingers. I pulled back instinctively. The ship was alive, I realized. Not just metaphorically. The steel hull, the polished floors, even the air itself seemed to react to my curiosity. I walked away, trying to rationalize the fear. Later, while exploring the mid-deck lounges, I met a fellow passenger named Thomas, a retired engineer from Florida. He was friendly and talkative, joking about how complicated the ship's layout was. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt almost normal. I even laughed. And then the doors of the lounge slid open on their own. A figure stepped through. Not Thomas. Someone else. Impossibly pale. Too tall. Moving silently. My stomach dropped. When I blinked, it was gone. Thomas laughed nervously, saying he must have imagined it. But I knew better. By mid-afternoon, the anomalies escalated. I noticed shadows moving against the grain of sunlight in the corridors. Passengers occasionally glanced at nothing, as if they sensed something lurking just out of sight. I returned to my cabin, hoping to rest, only to find that the layout had changed. My door led into a hallway I didn't recognize, lined with doors that didn't match the ship's schematics. Cabin 214 appeared multiple times. Each time I tried a different door, I found the same cabin, identical in every detail, yet slightly shifted, a photograph tilted, a pillow folded differently, a faint whisper echoing from within. I spent the afternoon circling cabin 214, cataloging every difference. A scratch appeared on the desk that hadn't been there before. Faint footprints formed on the carpet, leading nowhere. I felt a creeping dread, as if the ship were guiding me, teasing me towards something I wasn't ready to face. By evening, I heard it again. Whispers from the corridors, faint but urgent. Not just cabin 214 this time. Every deck seemed to hum with them. Voices overlapped, some passengers calling names I recognized, others speaking in garbled phrases I couldn't understand. I retreated to the upper deck, hoping the fresh sea air would clear my mind. Fog rolled in faster than usual, curling around the railings and drifting across the deck like smoke. In the mist, I glimpsed silhouettes of figures, passengers who had been alive hours ago, now frozen, pale, eyes hollow. They didn't move toward me, not yet, but the awareness of their presence was suffocating. That night, I resolved to face cabin 214 directly. I returned after dinner, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. The corridor shifted as I approached, numbering of doors becoming nonsensical. I counted 3 doors labeled 214 in a row, each identical. Sweat ran down my back. I hesitated at the first door, listening. A soft voice called my name, Morgan, drawing me in. I opened the first door. Inside, the bed was neatly made, the photograph on the wall of a couple smiling. But then the room seemed to exhale, a subtle motion, the walls bending slightly inward. A whisper brushed my ear, "Come closer." I recoiled, stumbling into the next cabin 214. Here, the bed was unmade, the curtains swaying though the windows were shut. A figure sat on the edge of the bed, its face obscured by shadows. I froze. The air smelled of salt and something metallic. Blood, maybe. The figure spoke softly, impossibly human. "You shouldn't have come back." I dashed to the third door labeled 214. The room was empty, or so it seemed. Then the door slammed shut behind me, and the lights flickered. A soft scratching began along the walls, moving closer, circling. Panic surged. I pounded the door, tried to open it, but the handle wouldn't budge. The room was alive, the cabin itself a trap, and I was inside. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed. The scratching evolved into whispering, words I could understand now, repeating, "Curiosity brought you. Curiosity keeps you." I sank to the floor, realizing the ship was no longer a vessel of transport. It was a predator, and cabin 214 its lure. Somewhere in the corridor outside, a creaking groan suggested movement. I could feel the deck beneath me shifting subtly, as if the ship were watching, adjusting, responding to my fear. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block it out, but the whispers seeped into my mind. And then a final sharp sound, metal clanging against metal, and the door swung open. I stood, heart racing, expecting the figure from the previous cabins. Instead, the corridor was empty. Mist drifted through the hallway. Cabin 214 doors still lined the wall, all identical, all slightly ajar. One of them whispered my name again, Morgan. I realized with dread that tonight would not end. Cabin 214 was everywhere and nowhere, shifting, waiting. And the ship was patient, feeding on curiosity, knowing that each step forward only drew me deeper into its maze. I took a deep breath, gripping my flashlight. Somewhere ahead, a door waited for me. I didn't know if it led to freedom or deeper horror, but I knew I couldn't stop moving. Sleep had abandoned me. The ship's hum, the subtle, omnipresent vibration beneath my feet, had become a pulse that synced with my heartbeat. Even in daylight, the corridors twisted in ways that didn't make sense. I could no longer rely on maps or signage. Stairwells led to floors that shouldn't exist, and doors opened into halls I didn't recognize. I am Morgan Hayes, 32, freelance photographer, someone who thought she could escape reality for a week. But the Ocean Whisperer had other plans. Cabin 214 had become a specter in my mind, haunting every step. Even when I avoided that corridor entirely, its presence clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. By the third night, the whispers were everywhere, not only in the halls, but inside the cabins, seeping from the vents, flickering through the PA system. Sometimes, the voices were passengers I had spoken to earlier, laughing or calling out names. Others were unknown, guttural, imploring me to stop, to leave, to look closer. I tried to distract myself. During a mid-morning coffee run, I found the dining hall nearly empty. Sunlight poured through the windows, glinting off polished tables, silverware aligned perfectly. For a moment, it was almost normal. Almost. But then I noticed the chairs, 3 empty ones arranged in a circle, rocking slightly as if someone had just left them. No one was around. The hum of the engines had shifted. I realized I wasn't hearing a machine anymore. I was hearing intent. I returned to my cabin, desperate for some anchor. The hallway stretched unnaturally as I approached. The numbers flickered on the doors, sometimes skipping, sometimes repeating. Cabin 214 appeared again, now closer, yet impossibly out of place. I hesitated, knowing I would step in, drawn by a compulsion I could not resist. Inside, the room was different. The bed was pushed against the wall. A chair sat inverted on the floor. Shadows pooled in corners that shouldn't exist. And then I saw it, a notebook lying open on the desk. The pages were filled with my own handwriting, describing things I hadn't done yet, observations I hadn't made, each sentence more detailed than I could possibly recall. One line stood out, "Do not leave, the ship knows you." A chill ran down my spine. I dropped the notebook, stumbling back. The room seemed to pulse, walls breathing, floorboards groaning in rhythm with the whispers. Then I noticed a figure standing near the window. Same pale, elongated man from before, hat casting his face in shadow. He raised a finger, pointing toward the corridor, and whispered, "Curiosity is not harmless." I bolted out of the room, flashlight swinging wildly. The corridor behind me stretched endlessly. I passed multiple doors marked 214, each identical, each whispering my name. A sudden screech, a door slamming, made me jump. When I looked back, the door I had just exited was gone, replaced by another 214, perfectly aligned, perfectly silent. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, stress, imagination. But that rationalization broke when I reached the ship's middeck. A passenger, a young woman I had seen in the dining hall that morning, was leaning against the railing, pale, unblinking, staring out into the fog. I approached cautiously. Her lips moved, forming words I could not hear, her eyes hollow. Then she turned, and I realized she was calling my name in my voice. Panic overtook me. I ran, turning corners, descending stairwells that spiraled impossibly downward. The PA system crackled. A voice I recognized as the captain's boomed. "Welcome aboard the Ocean Whisperer. Enjoy your stay." Only the intonation was wrong, slower, distorted, mocking. The ship itself was speaking. Hours, or maybe minutes, later, I found myself on the top deck again. The fog had thickened into a wall, and beyond it, I glimpsed shapes moving. Passengers frozen mid-step, crew members staring blankly, figures emerging from nowhere and disappearing as quickly. Cabin 214 doors were lined along the deck railing now, floating, impossible. I understood then that the ship had consumed the architecture, the crew, the passengers. It could manifest whatever it wanted to draw me in. I tried a lifeboat. The door led to a small, cramped space, yet as I looked out, the water outside was black and endless, stretching into infinity. The rope ladders dangled, swaying slowly, though the ship remained perfectly still. I realized the ocean was irrelevant. The ship did not sail water. It sailed the perceptions and fears of its passengers. Exhausted, I leaned against the lifeboat wall. A whisper came from behind me. "One more choice." I turned. There were 3 doors, identical, standing upright on the deck itself, far from the railings. 214. Each door emitted a faint glow, and I felt compelled to step through. I hesitated. One step could mean freedom. One step could mean disappearance. I could hear the tapping again, a rhythmic, intentional sound emanating from the mist. My heartbeat matched it. I swallowed hard, feeling the air thicken. And then one of the doors opened itself. A hand reached out. The fog pressed against me like a living thing, thick and suffocating. Each heartbeat echoed off the floating doors marked 214, their faint glow beckoning, daring me to step forward. I am Morgan Hayes, 32, photographer, a woman who thought she could escape the world for a week. But this ship, Ocean Whisperer, had other designs. The hand from the open door hovered, its shadow stretching unnaturally. I could feel its presence tugging at my curiosity, promising answers, freedom, or something far worse. I clenched my fists, struggling to resist the pull, but instinctively, I stepped closer. Before I could react further, the ship shifted violently beneath me. A groan of steel echoed, muffled whispers rushing through the fog like wind through hollow halls. I looked around. Passengers I had seen earlier, the laughing families, the jovial couples, now appeared translucent, frozen, some reaching out silently toward me. Their faces twisted with fear and anticipation, as if they were part of the ship, waiting for me to join. I ran, dodging the hands, the floating doors, the mist. The PA system crackled, distorted, repeating my own thoughts in a slow, mocking cadence. Step forward, step forward. I turned corners that looped impossibly back on themselves. Every exit I tried led me to more 214 doors. Each door whispered, beckoned, promised something I didn't want but couldn't resist. I remembered the note from earlier. Some doors are meant to be left closed. The warning echoed in my mind as a siren of reason against the ship's pull. I wanted to leave, to escape, to find something solid, but the corridors were endless, and my own name kept echoing, spoken by unseen voices in a tone that chilled me to the bone. Then, I saw a door slightly different from the others. Its frame was cracked, paint peeling, a single rusty handle. Something primal inside me knew it was different, yet inviting. Against all instinct, I reached for it. The moment my hand touched the handle, the fog surged, swirling around me like waves in a storm. Whispers crescendoed into screams, layered and overlapping, a chorus of passengers lost to the ship's hunger. I pulled the door open. Inside, I found nothing. Or at least, nothing I could comprehend. The room stretched into infinity, walls dissolving into darkness, ceiling vanishing. I could see my reflection on the polished floor, my own eyes wide, trembling, but the reflection moved independently. It raised a hand in warning, then smiled. A voice, soft and deliberate, came from everywhere. "Curiosity brought you. Only curiosity can save you." Panic surged. I stepped back. Behind me, the hallway of floating doors twisted, undulating as if alive. One by one, the doors opened, revealing glimpses of other passengers, some screaming, some silent, all staring, waiting. The ship was hungry for engagement, feeding on attention, and I was the newest focus. I stumbled forward, seeking escape. One of the doors, the one with the peeling frame, emitted a faint light, pulsating like a heartbeat. I stepped through. The air was cold, sharper than the fog outside. For a moment, silence. Then a faint knock echoed from the far corner. Another knock, closer. I froze. If you're listening, take a second to subscribe to Midnight Outcry. It helps keep stories like this alive. I whispered to myself, almost as a mantra, almost as a tether to reality. Saying it out loud gave me focus, a momentary anchor amidst the madness. The knocking intensified, rhythmic, impatient. Shadows lengthened along the walls, forming shapes that weren't human. A distorted reflection of myself appeared in the floor, eyes wide, mouth moving without sound. And then the hand reached out again, this time from nowhere, almost through me. I realized the final truth. The ship didn't want me to escape. It wanted me to choose. Step forward, embrace the doors, become part of its labyrinth, or step back and let curiosity die. But even retreat was impossible. I closed my eyes, heart hammering, and felt the floor shift beneath me, the walls breathing, the mist thickening. Then, a single whisper. "Choose, Morgan, choose." I opened my eyes. The doors were gone. Only the fog remained, moving, alive, curling around me. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of engines pulsed like a heartbeat, syncing with my own. And in that moment I understood. The ship was patient, eternal, and I had been its plaything from the moment I set foot aboard. I don't know how long I stood there. Time seemed irrelevant. All I knew was that one step could end me, or begin something far worse. And then I saw it. A door, faintly glowing in the mist. Not 214, not labeled at all, simply there. My curiosity surged. My fear screamed. I reached out, and I stopped. Because in the reflection on its surface, I saw the ship, not the room, not the corridors, but the entirety of the Ocean Whisperer, infinite, alive, and staring back at me. I couldn't tell if it wanted me to enter, or if it had been me all along. I don't know how long I stood frozen before the fog began to move differently. Not swirling aimlessly, not drifting with the wind. It shifted with intent, as though it were observing me, learning my hesitations, testing my impulses. I am Morgan Hayes, 32, freelance photographer from Portland, and I should have turned back, run for anything solid, but curiosity had me in its grip. The ship had already claimed pieces of me. My own reflection moved independently, reminding me that I was not in control. The glowing door in the mist pulsed again, slower now, like a heartbeat measured against my own. Shadows pooled around it, and then I noticed the faint outlines of other passengers, the ones who had been frozen, pale, faceless. They drifted just beyond the edge of vision. I could hear whispers again, soft, overlapping, and in them I caught fragments of words that made my stomach twist. "You will see. You will join. Forever." I took a step toward the door. My foot sank slightly, as if the mist itself were a floor, solid yet yielding. The ship groaned beneath me, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through my bones. Then the floor rippled. The corridor I had come from, the hallways, even the upper decks. I realized they didn't exist the way I thought. The ship had remade itself around me, shaped by fear, by attention, by curiosity. Every heartbeat drew me closer to its design. I tried to run, but the fog thickened, pressing against my skin, and I stumbled into one of the floating 214 doors that had reappeared behind me. I slammed it shut, heart hammering, and felt the familiar draft of cold air, the same smell of brine and metal that had haunted me from the first night. I was caught between two impossibilities: the glowing door ahead, the ever-present 214 doors behind. I realized I had nowhere safe to go. A voice, soft, terrifyingly human, spoke from the mist. "Morgan." It was mine, yet distorted, echoing in ways no living mouth could produce. "The ship has watched you. It knows you. You will stay." I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to shut it out, but the whispers didn't stop. They threaded into my memory, replaying every step I had taken aboard this vessel. Every curiosity, every glance at cabin 214, every choice I had made. The ship fed on me, and now it was offering a choice I could not refuse. One more step, one hand brushing the glowing door. My reflection, impossibly clear now, materialized in the fog before me. It smiled, a cruel, knowing smile, and whispered, "Curiosity brought you. Step forward. or remain forever lost. I didn't move. I couldn't move. And then I felt it. A tugging, subtle at first, like gravity pulling me toward the door, then insistent, like the ship itself was drawing me into its infinite corridors. I could see fragments of the lives it had swallowed before, faces in the mist, twisted in silent screams, frozen mid-action. Some were passengers, some crew, some shadows I couldn't identify. They watched, waiting, patient, and in the center of it all, cabin 214 hovered, singular, larger than reality, glowing faintly. I knew then it wasn't just a door, not just a room. It was the heart of the ship, the trap that lured curiosity and turned it into fuel. I wanted to step back, to escape. I wanted to run anywhere that wasn't here. But the fog seemed to have weight, and every movement felt like dragging through syrup. My breath came in short gasps, my pulse hammering in my ears. The mist whispered my name over and over. Then I saw it, another hand, emerging from the glowing door. Not real, not human, not yet, not human. I reached toward it, instinctively, curiosity overriding fear, and the fog thickened, swallowing the deck, the doors, the very world around me. I don't know what happened next. I remember being pulled forward, a sensation of motion, of weightlessness, of merging with something larger than myself, and then silence. Now I can feel the ship, its pulse, its waiting. Every time someone new steps aboard, the fog moves, the doors shift, and I watch. I am still here, in some sense, tethered, observing, trapped in the labyrinth of floating corridors and endless 214 doors. And if you ever find yourself aboard the Ocean Whisperer, wandering the upper decks in the fog, know this: some doors are meant to be left closed. Some curiosities are best ignored, because once the ship notices you, it will never let go. And somewhere in the mist, I hear my own name being called again.